All across the country, Asian Americans are speaking out, calling for a reckoning about racism that they've experienced and they feel has been ignored for far too long. Actor Vang is one of them, and he starred opposite Clint Eastwood in the 2008 film Gran Torino.
Get off my lawn. You better watch your back.
Thank you.
My thing is just like, you stay with me, because if I have to come back here again, it's gonna be ugly.
What was it like to kill a man?
You don't want to know. Tao and Sue are never gonna find peace in this world, as long as that gang's around.
What are you gonna do, Walt?
Whatever it is, they won't have a chance.
Vang wrote recently about the way he believes the film mainstreamed anti-Asian racism.
Asian American racism is being talked about all over the country right now, and one of the leading spokespersons on this topic is the actor, co-star from Clint Eastwood Gran Torino, Vang. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vang here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's awesome to be able to be here with you. So we were just watching those clips. I was watching Gran Torino the other day, and then all of this stuff started going down, and so I thought this was a great opportunity to have you on. So tell us, I don't watch a lot of TV, I don't watch a lot of news, and so I want to ask a lot of just, I don't know if they're going to seem basic questions to you, but I really want to understand this topic a little bit more. So it seems that Asian American racism is kind of becoming a crisis across the country right now. Why now? Why is this now becoming the topic?
Well, I think that what we're seeing today is the practice of an ideology of anti-Asian racism that is being brought to a head. You can think of it as a kind of heightening of contradictions that is allowing us to see what has been lurking underneath, everything about this country and its refusal to deal with racism. And part of the problem with why it's now being seen is because of the invisibility that is part of the Asian American experience. And this invisibility is a kind of representation that lended itself to a misrepresentation and a misinterpretation. And so, for a lot of people, this meant that they, really didn't know about Asian American issues. They think that Asian American issues are non-issues. And, the model minority trope is another very insidious thing that convinces a lot of people that Asian Americans don't have a struggle in this country, even if the violence that we're seeing takes its place in a very long history of anti-Asian hate and violence in this country.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What is that struggle that is really happening for? I mean, there was the awful attacks that happened a few weeks ago. Yeah. Have there been a lot of attacks like that have been going on? Was that kind of the first? Is that kind of like the big attack that's really kind of sparked this movement, or is there something that's been kind of going on for a while?
I think that what really changed, turned the tide for it, this movement of Asian Americans calling out this anti-Asian racism of the COVID-19 pandemic is, really the massacre in Atlanta, Georgia, which claimed the lives of 6 Asian women and 2 others. And it took that massacre, this hyper-visibility of violence, to make everyone notice and to finally believe that anti-Asian racism exists. Before that, we had several attacks across the country and around the world. It's not just here in the U.S. Everywhere across the world, in in Western countries, you have a lot of attacks, verbal, physical assaults on the Asian diaspora. And so, this is something that a lot of us, those of us who studied Asian American history, have been warning about for several years. And I myself have been speaking about this issue for almost over a decade, since Gran Torino ended. Yeah. So it's just, it's being brought to a head because it took this moment for people to finally acknowledge that this is a real problem.
Would you consider this a crisis that's happening in America, around the world?
I would consider it a crisis as much as COVID-19 is a crisis, a public health crisis. And to the extent that, people now are suffering from PTSD, and a lot of Asian Americans have fear of going outside these days, it's becoming a clear crisis, and it's pretty clear cut for me, especially when I went to the airport earlier this morning. I sat there in my seat, really just being conscious and aware of my Asianness or my Asian body.
Yeah.
And I just kept saying to myself, I need to have situational awareness. I have to understand that, I am singled out because I'm Asian-bodied. Even if I am born here and am American myself, I'm not seen as American. I'm seen as, a foreigner. So for me, it's becoming something that so many of us who are Asian Americans are internalizing, that it is a crisis for us, for those of us in the know. To this day, I still hear a lot of people say, "Oh, Asian Americans are getting attacked? Huh? When did that become a thing?"
Yeah.
So it's frustrating to know that our bodies are under attack and under assault, and then to also understand that, no one is actually listening or acknowledging our pain and our hurt and our injury.
Yeah, I guess, no, I love that. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, where's the line of, what's crisis and what's the way of life, which is unfortunate, that's the way of life. But I feel, you're describing you being at an airport, and the thought that's coming through my head is how many people with homosexuality maybe feel attacked? How many women feel attacked? How many African Americans feel attacked? How many Asians feel attacked? How many, I feel there's so many people who feel that they are under attack. What do we do as society to go through all of these people not feeling that they're getting some prejudice to them, that they're getting some violence to them? Because I feel like we've had a lot of people come on the show and they express that they feel, they're, something about them of who they are is under attack. It could be that they're, Donald Trump supporters. They could be the Black Lives Matter. There's so many people who are just you were under attack, and I feel like everyone's under attack. So what do we do?
Well, this means that we organize and mobilize ourselves to tackle all these issues at the same time. I think that, coming from entertainment and media, I know the significance and the social consequences of stereotypes. And there are, these stereotypes that do produce real world consequences. As I said, the model minority trope is something that convinces everyone that, Asian Americans are just well-educated, affluent, and it has made us into these soft targets, where people think that, we can be made into victims. It's easier to victimize an Asian American person than perhaps anyone else. And that is why so many of our Asian American elders and Asian American women are being targeted so much. That's something that, of course, has been revealed in the last couple of months, that so many of these attacks have been on Asian American elders and Asian American women. But I think that part of what this is teaching us is that we have to come to terms with racism, and instead of laughing it off as a joke or a harmless joke, as I wrote in my NBC op-ed, and we have to deal with it and reckon with this history of racism that's clearly not only consigned to the past, but is something that continues to haunt us in the present. And it haunts us through these stereotypes that refuses our humanity in many ways. It doesn't see us as complex individual human beings. Instead, it sees us as these inhuman, caricatures that make it easier for people to not see the humanity in us, that make it easier for people to want to victimize us.
And it's crazy to me that people just don't find, I like to view every single person that I come in contact. It's our whole mission of our show, that every single person is here with a purpose and everyone has value. And so it's crazy that some people don't see everyone as, I don't know if equals is the right word, but as equals, as they're,
Right.
They're human beings. I want to retract for a second what you were talking about, stereotypes. Can you unpack what do you mean by stereotypes? I think a lot of us are trying, I know a lot of people, and me personally, I want to know are any stereotypes okay? Or how are stereotypes harmful? What do you mean by stereotypes?
Well, stereotypes is something that is sort of thrown at us. It's a way that people of color or non-Western people have
If I
sort of been
say like
imagined.
you're really great at making sushi or something like that, is that considered stereotyping?
That would be considered a form of stereotyping.
And is
yes.
that bad? Would that be bad if I said like I assume that you're coming out here and I'm assuming like, oh, you want to eat sushi? Is that bad?
It's bad because you're making assumptions about who I am before you even know who I am, actually. So
You might hate sushi.
I don't though. I
but
love sushi.
But you could.
I could.
And that's
yeah.
the point of
point.
it. That's fascinating. Yeah, I think that's really good stuff. Do you have any other advice for people of what we should be doing on overcoming the Asian American racism specifically?
Yeah. I currently work with this NGO called War Legacies Project, which deals with raising awareness and advocating for and helping with post-war recovery efforts in Southeast Asia, where the Vietnam War was fought less than 45 years ago.
Yeah.
And there are still aftermath legacies of this war that was fought in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam that are still felt today. This is from UXO's unexploded ordnance that maim people and explode and melt civilians' skins and flesh. And
awful.
it's pretty bad. And there's also the issue of Agent Orange and dioxin contamination that poisons the food sources and food systems for many of the people living there. And there are fourth and fifth generation congenital malformations that people are suffering from today. Young kids who did not fight in this war but now inherit the consequences of this war. And so, part of why it's so important to remove these stereotypes and to do away with them is that, when we see Asians as only successful as crazy rich Asians, as wealthy, as well off, as educated, whatever, the geopolitical consequences are that we don't see exactly how heterogeneous Asia actually is and how heterogeneous the Asian American experience actually is.
Yeah.
So we refuse to see how the people in Laos, in my homeland, are, suffering from this war. And so I think that, part of my work in fighting the stereotypes and raising awareness about what happened in Southeast Asia is precisely educating everyone and needing everyone to better understand the Asian American experience, as we need to understand everyone, because understanding is so important, because, compassion is the way that we allow ourselves to build a bridge to see each other as human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on, B. I know that we are nearing the end of our show. I did want to talk about one more topic. I was talking with a producer the other day, and we were talking about how a lot of people are brought up with not seeing color, not seeing people as color, right? And I feel a lot of what's happening is people are wanting people to see color. So, like, what do you have a thought on that? Of like, do we see people as people, or do we see them as like African American and they might be hurting? You talk about bringing awareness, right? And so now it's like really, I feel like you're almost like people are like excluding themselves from like this
Right.
group by being like, look at us, look at us. And so then I feel like we're now viewing people as, oh, B. Vang is now Asian American, right? Like, I don't know. Do you have any like thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of contradictions with our language and the ways that we think about these issues. Obviously, the ideological conclusion to that way of thinking is to fall back on a kind of racial essentialism, where suddenly we begin to self-segregate. Oh, I'm Asian. Only I can understand another Asian person, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think that there are ways that this can be destructive to our collective humanity. And so, yes, I see that there is a danger, but at the same time, I think in this country, what's happening is that the discourse of multiculturalism has allowed us to not see the problem of racism. And there's a big difference between racism and race. I am Asian American, doesn't mean that there's anything inherently different about my humanity from yours.
Yeah.
But I come from a very different background and a very different experience. And so I think that when people mention race, that's what they're highlighting. And I think that that's something that gets lost if we all just suddenly claim that we're human beings. Even if, if we're all human beings, then, let's not talk about poverty and certain communities. Let's not talk about the ways that certain communities are disenfranchised. Let's not talk about the ways that zip codes determine, which child is going to succeed academically. Those are the types of things that we are erasing and don't see in our analysis of society. So that's why race is something that we do have to name. But I think that the ultimate goal, obviously, is to get us to the point where it's no longer the thing that defines us and defines our relationship, but defines just who we are.
I love that, and I don't think, I'm absolutely a full believer that we shouldn't have the race be a determining factor. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I think it's great, and I really hope that we as a civilization can figure out how to just all get along, find the beauty in every single person that we come in contact with.
Right, exactly.
And so I love that. B, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a complete privilege to have you fly out for this.